John, one of the most important things for our viewers to do today is respect your authority.
Well, certainly Cartman would insist on that for sure. But the artwork is pretty funny. So I figured I'll go with the flow, and I'm here in the hallway and there's nobody here with me. So nobody's in school yet.
Inside joke for fans of South Park, of course, but we've got you depicted as a cartoon character in an empty classroom. Why did we do that today, John?
Well, we're going to focus today's show on getting back to school. And a lot of the stories that I'm reading have to do with what's it going to take to reopen the schools. I'm reading a lot of stories about that. And I thought it might make some sense to dig in and get a better understanding of what type of undertaking this is, right? How big a project is it? And I have a background with projects, right? So we want to look at how big a project is it to reopen these schools and what kind of money is required. And when we go to our patron-only segment, we're also going to look at some of the money that was authorized in this spending act and where that money's going. So we're going to look at that when we go patron-only. But if you are able to pull up that PDF deck that I sent you a bunch of slides. And I think the audience is going to be real interested. So for those of you who are not familiar with my work, this is the map that Johns Hopkins has been using to track the outbreak. And it's built with a tool that I helped put together about 30-something years ago. So this was my first indication that something was wrong with this outbreak. And that was that there weren't 10 people dead in Beijing. There weren't 10 people dead in Shanghai. There weren't 10 people dead in Taiwan. And I couldn't understand that. And there was no one dead in Laos, no one dead in Cambodia. So that led me to dig in deeper. And if you go to the next slide, this is the exciting part of the show. We're going to look at Flying Fox, and we're going to take a real close look. In fact, we're going to go inside Flying Fox.
Ooh.
when we get to our patron.
Well, but we should tell people this is Jeff Bezos' boat. Frankly, if I owned that thing, I would just never leave. I would stay on that, and why bother with any of the coronavirus or anything?
Exactly. And so the reason, it's sort of a twofold reason. Why are we going to look at Flying Fox? One, like you said, Jeff Bezos just stepped down as CEO of Amazon. And if you just bought this boat in the last year or two, and you've got a new girlfriend, and your wealth has recovered since your split with your first wife or what have you,
right?
Right. So he's living large, and he's Now the other question is but we've also talked about how many CEOs have stepped down in the last year or two. Larry Page, Sergey Brin, so many top-level guys have stepped down, walked away, resigned from their CEO or chairmanship roles in the past year. And now Jeff Bezos. And so one of the wacky theories that we've talked about is, what if there was some sort of an event that was coming in a number of years, and these guys were privy to it? And they kind of figured, well, if there's only N number of years left, I'm going to spend them on my yacht. Right. Enough of this quarter-to-quarter nonsense. I'm going to Tahiti. I got the yacht. I'm out of here. And I got the new girlfriend, and I'm gone, right? So we're going to take a look at this yacht. The other reason is this boat costs about $500 million to build.
Ooh.
Okay. All right, so at $500 million, it makes the math easy. And we're going to use this as sort of an understanding block to look at budgets. Because at $500 million, $500 million, this will help us understand what it takes. Now, if you go to the next page, which is the Apple headquarters, this is something else. We're going to take a look at a video. I want you guys to understand the construction that went on here. This, I believe, is the largest air-conditioned building in the world.
Wow.
Yeah, something like that now. Maybe the Pentagon still, but this is quite a project at a cost of $5 billion.
Whoa.
All right, so we're
That
going to
doesn't even
use this.
float.
All right, so we're
I'll
going to
take the ship.
exactly. Well, actually, guess what? It does kind of float, and you're going
What
to
are you
see
talking
that in
about?
the video. You're going to see that in the video. It's wild. It's wild. But $5 billion went into this, and again, I want people to understand what size project is a $5 billion project. So we're going to look at this now. If we go to the next slide. We are using the data from the CDC. That's all we use here, right? So, and we're not giving any medical advice. I had another video pulled down by YouTube that was a private video, so it wasn't published, and they still pulled it down and said it was giving medical misinformation. We're not giving any information, no medical information. We're just looking at numbers. That's it. We're not doctors, right? So there's no medical advice on this show, just to make that clear. And all the data comes from the CDC.
I appreciate you saying that, John. You know, I also want to remind people, John, that in just about 25 minutes, we're going to start that sponsor-exclusive show. People can get it on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and Subscribestar and Patreon/Crowdsource the Truth. You know, John, I got a surprise for you after the show. I have restored a number of links to our legacy library. You may recall that after a couple of little hiccups with Vimeo having to do with exposing that dude in the parrot pajamas and a couple of other things, learning how Vimeo strikes work compared to YouTube strikes, we're obviously, you know, in good standing with Vimeo and using it, but a lot of the legacy videos from the library have been removed. And now the Crowdsource the Truth video server that is only going to be used for Crowdsource the Truth sponsor exclusive videos is in its first stage of active beta testing. It is now functional with Subscribestar.com. So our sponsors who are presently sponsoring the show on Subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen or Patreon, or Subscribestar.com/Crowdsource the Truth will be able to go back into the months and weeks prior and see a lot more of the episodes that some people have been asking, hey, where did that stuff go? I'm in the process of building back the full library, and we're also trying to work with Patreon to get this server integrated over there. But for now, people can enjoy it on Subscribestar.
That's great, because that's been months in the making, and it's something that I think about often, which is perseverance would have no meaning and no value if it wasn't for adversity.
It's true.
What would we need it for? And why would anybody?
And frankly, it's the only way to succeed, John. You know, the only people who ever fail are those who give up or die trying. And we're not going to do either. Well,
I'm okay with the second one. I'm all right with
we're not going to. I mean, eventually that might happen, but hopefully not. The other thing I want to remind people of is that the John E. Hoover YouTube channel, which is totally free to subscribe to, has broken free of the 33K. It's now at 34,000 subscribers. So thank you to everyone who's been subscribing to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel. You can get the simulcasts of our Friday shows, the live shows here on YouTube, as well as John's content that he's putting up there. So please subscribe to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel.
Now, I did have to take all of the coronavirus videos down, except for the few that you see up now, because I was getting community strikes on private videos that weren't published. And so if they're going to strike private videos that aren't published, there's nothing else I can do. So I had to literally delete them all. And the sad part of that is all the comments, everything that everybody said, all the links that were shared, it's all gone. And that's kind of tragic.
Project Design is telling us that Patreon CEO has been fired? I haven't heard that.
No, Patreon. I heard Parler, the CEO of Parler, was
That
fired.
sounds right. The Parler
Yeah.
CEO has been fired. I don't think anything is going on with Jack Conte, the Patreon CEO. He's in good standing over there. The Parler CEO has been ousted by the board and the Mercers and all that kind of thing. But
We're gonna
Patreon
talk
is in
about
good standing. And I just want to
that
shout out
next
to
week. I
our
want to
Patreon
yeah.
sponsors who have made this show possible for so long. If anybody is feeling at all bad about not being able to access the Legacy Library, just send me an email, and whether it's John's channel or my channel, we'll absolutely work with you guys to get you onto Subscribestar so you can see this stuff. And I don't want anybody to feel like they're being left out.
Indeed.
Parler, yeah. People are confirming it's Parler CEO. Sorry. Yeah, there we go.
And next week's show, we're going to be talking about the Mercers. We're going to go visit Owl's Nest out on Long Island. We're going to go look at their yacht. There's a lot of real interesting things having to do with Rebecca Mercer and her dad. Her dad was one of the largest funders of the Trump campaign and owns Breitbart. So he both funded Bannon and then fired Bannon. Right? They both funded Parler and fired the CEO of Parler. And Rebecca's dad is Cambridge Analytica. All right, so it's a real interesting story. So we're going to get into that next week, and we're also going to talk about Brookings next week, because between you and me and the bone I've got to pick with Bruce Rydell, and then the bone you've got to pick with another, handful of them, I'm just wondering, is Brookings Institute just another name for you-know-who? So we're going to get into that next week. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all these think tank type, centers for public this or that. It's basically just a giant den of billionaires and politicians and ex-spies.
Right. Former spies. Exactly. So we'll get into that next week. But yeah, former spies. Yeah. Which you seem to attract lots of these former spies. So,
I don't think they're former. But you're right.
Well,
they are attracted to me.
So what do we have here? There we go.
This, I think, is the Brookings Institution. Whoops, just went right past it.
There we go.
There it is.
I'm looking forward to getting into this next week. This is going to be a good show next week because
James Comey loves this thing.
Oh yeah. And Rydell couldn't be further off from what's actually happening. But this week's show, we've got some amazing stuff. We got to get to the yacht. We got to get to Apple, to their headquarters, and we got to do a quick review of where we are with the numbers globally and in the United States. Globally, if you just go another page down in the deck or so, you'll get to the global number, and I think it's at 2.3 million deaths.
It's funny, John, because the news today has been saying, it's lower than ever. I feel like each day it's like, oh my God, coronavirus higher than ever. Next day, half as many. So it's just yo-yo.
And that's why we just use data, right? So we're not giving advice here. This slide right here is showing daily new deaths in the United States. We know on a global basis, more people are dying right now than at any time in the outbreak. And in the USA, if you look on the right side of the chart, it's a whole lot higher than it was back in April of 2020. And April of 2020 was when the president of the United States rolled out all those emergency field hospitals. And so if we rolled out all those emergency field hospitals back in April for that peak, why aren't we doing it now for this peak? And are we sure that look how much higher this peak is than before. Back in April, there were fewer than 3,000 a day dying. But now in January, we have eclipsed 4,000. This is way more than President Trump was facing. Way more. Now, when Trump rolled out those field hospitals, that was in the event that the regular hospitals were going to be overrun, right? Well, we got way more people dying right now. So, again, I'm not giving any advice. I'm just saying 4,000 is more than 2,800. That should be not terribly controversial.
I think if you were to ask somebody like perhaps Emmy Award-winning Governor Andrew Cuomo, he would say, people are dying. Who cares?
You know what I was going to ask you about him? I saw this
Yeah.
thing just before we got on air, and I didn't have time to put in the deck, so I printed it. New York State Senate Democrats block subpoena for nursing home fatality data. How do you block a subpoena? How do you do that? How do you block a subpoena?
Lawyers can do it. We'd have to look at the language of what they've written. I mean, this is some sort of a lawsuit coming from Letitia James, probably like an Article 78 petition or something like that, along the lines of what Carl Schwartz was putting together, because I don't think he can be sued, and it doesn't seem to be a criminal charge against him, but they're just doing whatever kind of lawyer crap you can do to block a subpoena, and obviously they don't care. He said, who cares?
Pass it, if you would. Pass it to Larry and ask Larry, how do you block a subpoena for data? If there's
just a motion, I think.
That's phenomenal. Amazing. I'm impressed. All right, let's go back to the data if we can, please. I want to show people what we got going on here. We got some fun stuff. All right, so more people are dying now than ever, right? So regardless of what you hear on the radio or what you see on TV, more people are dying than back in April in the United States. Okay. Now it is coming off of the peak, but it's still way higher than it was back in April. All right, let's go to the next slide. The thing that has me concerned right now is something we never really looked at before, which is active cases. And in the past, I've ignored cases. But now that we've come to terms with the fact that there is no therapeutic treatment, active cases matter. We have 10 million Americans actively infected and no therapeutic treatment other than remdesivir, and remdesivir isn't approved by the WHO.
Wait a minute, real quick, John, because there's a lot of people who write to us here in the comments and say that because of their job or whatever, they've had to take it X number of times. Some people taking it 10 times, 15 times. Is that what's happening? Because I don't know that they necessarily say, John Cullen, 5 tests positive is just 5 positives.
All right, so this chart's not tests. This chart is people. Active cases, number of infected people. This is not tests. So we're not counting tests. Tests, we have 300 million tests. We did 300 million tests. We have 10 million actively infected people. Different chart. I have the other chart. 300 million tests have been administered over that, and 10 million are actively infected. And the issue here is, what do you give these 10 million people?
Tickets to the Super Bowl.
You give them a prayer card. You give them the name of their local funeral home. I mean, what is the plan here? There's no therapeutic. Well, I want to play a clip of Dr. Fauci on a radio show back in March of 2020 with Chris Stiegel in Philadelphia. And Chris Stiegel asks Fauci, if you were treating your patient, you had that woman on, Tina, who said her doctor prescribed something and she couldn't get it filled because
hydroxychloroquine.
All right, so listen to this interview. This is Chris Stiegel, Stigal. I have it here queued up. You don't have to do anything. I've got it here. And this is Dr. Fauci being asked, what would you do if it was your patient? Let me play this for the audience, okay? Here we go.
Yeah. If you're a doctor listening to me right now and a patient with coronavirus feels like maybe they want to try that, and you're their doctor, you're not Anthony Fauci, the guy running the coronavirus task force right now, would you say, all right, we'll give it a whirl?
Yeah, of course. I mean, particularly if people have no other option, you want to give them hope. In fact, physicians in this country, these drugs are approved drugs for other reasons. They're anti-malaria drugs, and they're drugs against certain autoimmune diseases like lupus. Physicians throughout the country can prescribe that in an off-label way, which means they can write it for something that it was not originally approved for. People do that all the time, and it really is an individual choice between the physician and his or her patient.
So, but not in Tina's case.
Right.
So in Tina's case, the decision between the doctor and the patient was overruled by your Emmy Award-winning governor.
Who
And
cares?
I'm not sure, how does he get in the middle of that? According to Dr. Fauci, Fauci said he would have used it. He would have given it to his patients. You just heard that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I wasn't hallucinating. You heard that too, right? He said that.
They did an interview, Cuomo and Fauci. I think they were talking about meatballs and sauce, and he likes the boyfriend. He's got a lot of stupid stuff to say.
Well, certainly Fauci said at one point he would certainly use it. All right, let's go back to our deck before we have to go patron only, and let me just show the audience just a little bit of what we're going to get into here. I need to kind of jump forward. Yeah, so this is the children. We're talking about opening up the schools. And when we look at all children 0 to 14 years old, there's only 134 dead in the whole United States with COVID. That's it. This is from the CDC. That's why I just showed you the website a minute ago. This is coming from their website. So this is their data. So that's
So let's just reemphasize that, John. Out of 421,378 deaths in the United States, an additional 134 are children between the ages of 0 and 14. So that is such a statistically infinitesimal number. It literally is, I mean, that's a statistical error. It's within the margin of error.
Oh, but that these are death certificate. These are real kids.
I mean, you know what I'm saying. It's just such a small number on a
small portion. And that's why I'm graphing it. I want people to understand the ratio that's about perspective, right? Perspective is important here. So when we go to the next slide.
This would be like saying, there were 10 auto accidents, so cars are now illegal.
I hear you. All right, so this is where the data is coming from. And what's interesting is the first column, after you see the age group, is all deaths involving COVID. But the column next to it is what we're going to get into tonight, and that's deaths from all causes. And when we compare the deaths of children from COVID to the deaths from all causes, it appears that COVID's not the really big problem. There's other problems that we may need to add to the budget. Okay? And that's what we're going to get into tonight. So I don't know. You got to keep me honest with the clock. How many minutes do we have? Do we have 60 seconds?
1 minute, yeah.
All right. So if you can go down one slide, 2 slides, and let me show the audience where we're headed with this. All right. So when we look across the various age groups, what we're finding is that COVID is a small portion of deaths from all sources. And for the younger kids, there's far, far greater threats to their lives. Now, kids can get sick, right? It's okay if a kid gets a fever for 2-3 days and they're in bed shivering and whatever, and they cough and then they get better. I think that's okay. I don't think we have to shut the world down and stop flying airplanes over that. It's kids dying that we want to make sure that that's not happening. Well, when we count them, there's not that many kids dying, right? And in fact, when we go up to the age of teachers and we look at, well, how old are the teachers? There's other things killing the teachers more than COVID. Far, far greater risks to people in those age groups than COVID. So this is what we're going to be doing in this show, is looking at what else is killing people in these various age groups. If you go to the next slide, if we have 15 seconds, I'll show you what's left. Yeah, skip that. That's just another age group. Keep going until we get to like a new topic. Yeah. Okay, here, the next one. All right, so the CDC has said in-person schools may reopen with precautions as data shows scant virus spread. So that's what the CDC has said. But Congress has said, no, we need money. So if you go to the next slide, there's money that's needed. And Jen Psaki won't say what is the priority, the teachers or the students, and that's kind of a that's a double bind. There's no good answer there. So let's go to the next slide. One more slide, and We can reopen the schools. This is the video we're going to play. This is Rachel Maddow interviewing the new head of the CDC. So this is the new Dr. Redfield. Redfield's gone. Redfield's out. And this is Dr. Rochelle Walensky, and she is an MD. And we're going to hear what she has to say. She's fantastic, but I don't think we have time for that until we get to our...
Yeah, we're going to make the move over to the sponsor exclusive show on subscribestar.com and patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, as well as subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Just real quick before we do that, John, you know, the New York Times and other sources are reporting that one of the things that's actually killing students of school-going age is suicide. So that's really a troubling problem, and I think we need to get some, well, we'll talk about it some more once we make the transition over to the sponsor exclusive show. Yeah.
Is that more kids? Am I here? You not hear me?
Yeah.
Check. Okay.
You're there.
Yeah. What the sponsors are going to find out when we go to our sponsor show is that more children in the USA have died from a stroke than from COVID. More kids in the USA have died from asthma than COVID. And we're going to drill into that when we go patron only.
All right. We'll see everybody over there in just